Good afternoon, San Antonio Startup Week. My name is Miko Fay, and I'm the MC for the main hall. And first, give a round of applause for yourselves for making out here 5 days of lots of knowledge and information. Thank you all for showing up and participating with us. We're a really special session this afternoon. I, myself, if you happen to know me, you would know I'm a huge music lover. I was out at a concert last night, which is why I'm a little tired today, but it was so worth it. So I can get to hear and talk about more music today. We have guests from the Philharmonic. They're going to tell their story about the creation of it. We know the pandemic was a struggle for a lot of artists, both those drawing, creating things, as well as music, when we couldn't actually go to those events and see them. But a lot of people struggled during that time, and we're going to hear some of the struggles and how they overcame it today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but I want to introduce Lara, our moderator, who's going to be talking with our panel, and I'm going to turn it over to her at this point. Lara?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us here at SA Startup Week. So a little bit of the background here. I began working with these musicians when they approached my company to help them with branding and marketing for the new Philharmonic. So I had such an incredible experience working with them, and I thought that their story was so compelling that I thought they just really needed to be part of San Antonio Startup Week. So that's why they're here today, and I think it makes the most sense for them to introduce themselves really quickly.
Thanks, everyone, for putting this together and getting us here. My name's Brian Pekovich. I'm a bassoon player. I've lived in San Antonio for 26 years. And I'm the president of the Philharmonic now going forward.
Hello, thanks for having us. My name is Karen Stiles, and I've lived in San Antonio since 1991. I'm a violinist, and I am the treasurer of the board for the San Antonio Philharmonic.
Okay, hello. I'm Stephanie Westney. I also play the violin. I am the secretary of the San Antonio Philharmonic, and I've been in San Antonio since 2006.
And I am Peter Rubens. I play the French horn. I have been in San Antonio since 1996. Met my wife here, raised a family, and we're very happy to be here for a Startup Week. I am the vice president of the San Antonio Phil.
Excellent. Okay, so there's a long history of the symphony here in San Antonio, and we don't want to dwell on the backstory as much as we want to tell your startup story here today. But I think there's a little bit of context that's required. So Brian, if you could give us a little framework for this.
The San Antonio Symphony started in 1939 and basically grew quickly into a major organization, one of the first symphony orchestras in Texas. And basically it went forward for the next 80-some years, 83 years, until this summer when the Symphony Society of San Antonio declared bankruptcy in June. Prior to that, this group of musicians decided to get an orchestra on stage in the spring and started to get out after the pandemic. I mean, it was really one of the harder things I think we've all had to deal with, both personally and just a year of cabin fever, to say the least. So after that, after the bankruptcy happened, we had already been playing a few concerts, and we quickly pivoted to just starting this fall.
Excellent. Okay, so in terms of the timelines on this, the bankruptcy wasn't entirely unexpected, but you formed the Philharmonic in August and you launched your season in September, correct?
Correct. I mean, we had we created a legal framework prior to that, but as far as like all the branding that you helped us with, greatly, and transitioning a lot of this, and then frankly just planning the season from scratch. I mean, this really has to go back over to Stephanie for a lot of kudos for getting that all planned and going. It was just amazing what you were able to do, and we can hear more about that maybe in a minute too. So it was an incredibly tight timeline, but we all figured out how to do that together.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm super curious. A lot of founders can probably relate to that moment when they decided we're going to start a thing, right? Like this, I'm going to go for it. And I would just love to get in your heads and hear what that conversation was like. You know, when and how did you guys decide we're going to go for it? We're going to launch a full-scale Philharmonic symphony here.
Well, as Brian mentioned, we were putting on some concerts already. So we did sort of a small scale season in the spring. We decided that we were going to do 3 concerts. And we had the goodwill of former conductors who had been with the orchestra a long time, who were willing to come conduct us. And the audience that we had in the past seemed very interested and motivated to come to the concerts. So we just did sort of a small scale season. This was while we were on strike from the symphony, which I think wasn't mentioned. But we were on a strike for a while before the bankruptcy, but we wanted to keep doing concerts, which we weren't able to do while we were on strike. So then at the moment that the symphony declared bankruptcy, then we had nothing. It was like, well, we know how to do this. They were really successful. People wanted to come. We were raising money. Like, well, we should just keep doing this, right? We know what to do. We've done it, and we can just kind of keep doing it. We just kind of decided, well, let's just go for it. So at that point, we had a really good relationship with First Baptist Church and Aaron Hufty, who had been our home for the first concerts that we had done, and they were willing to keep us this year. And so once we just kind of secured dates with them, it sort of all fell into place. And since we've all played in orchestra for years, we know what audiences want to hear, what we like to play, what conductors like to conduct. We sort of, even though we hadn't ever been on the operations end of it, we've been in the world for a long time. So it wasn't too far of a stretch to sort of just do it ourselves. So we had so much goodwill from people who had come before and lots of people who hated to see the oldest symphony in Texas fall apart, that they were like, well, what are you going to do? How can we help? And so it was, we just contacted lots of soloists and conductors, and people were very generous and willing to come if they were available. So it was very fast, but it was fun and exciting because everybody wanted to help.
So you mentioned that you didn't necessarily have any operational background, which is a perfect segue into my next question. What exactly are your backgrounds? Do any of you have entrepreneurship, or have you ever run a business or been on the operational side of a symphony before? If you could just share any experience in that area that you have, and if not, that's okay. We could just move right on to what you're currently doing in your roles with the symphony.
I would not claim to be an expert in these adventures that I had earlier, but I did make furniture for a while earlier. And then I also had a bit of a real estate startup as well, and my wife's an agent, and I was tagging on to that. But you know, we have many hobbies, I think, too, and other interests. Like I've always had an interest in many software programs. I've learned many of the Adobe Creative Suite programs to some degree as an amateur or a novice. But that experience was very helpful during the last few months, for sure. And then Brian and myself, I think we both have lived in spreadsheets for many, many, many years. So we've had a software background there, and perhaps with some of that entrepreneurial earlier adventures, I'd say, the pump was primed to step up and get going on this new adventure.
Yeah, I think Peter's being way too modest. It was an absolute collaboration on the website. We did not have time to build and set everything up. We helped set up an infrastructure, and he led another team of people that did all of the content integration and a lot of the setup of it, a lot of the technical back end. So he did an amazing job. So just to pump you up a little bit, because you're not going to say it. Okay, so what are your individual roles with the symphony right now? Because you're not just board members, you're doing all the things. So if you could kind of share, you do have some staff. So if maybe you could talk about who you do have, because it's a nonprofit organization. So that's, in terms of the arrangement, and you're the board members, but you're also filling many roles, wearing all of the hats, doing all of the things with a very limited staff. So if you could just kind of paint a picture for everyone.
Sure. I mean, very early on, we were doing all the work. I mean, there was no staff, and taking all the calls, trying to set up. I mean, Peter again set up a ticketing platform and got all that off the ground. I was doing a lot of the QuickBooks kind of stuff and some of the legal stuff as well. And so really, very quickly, this is growing, and we just knew that we started to need help. The first hire that we made was the education director from the former symphony. We brought him on because really we decided that one of the more important things that we need to do is be out in the schools and just be out in the community in a way that's meaningful for children who've just suffered through the pandemic greatly. So that was the first thing we needed to do, and that basically gets product out that we can actually use and sell. I mean, we're not, those concerts are free, so we're not selling those concerts, but we have to market them to the students in order to get bodies in the room. So that was the very first thing that we did. I think that was in July, in order to actually meet our timelines to get students from the classroom into local high schools where they're going to get bussed in. And so the planning for that was just really fast. And so that was the education director. Then we brought in a development person in order to help us, because very quickly we received a lot of help voluntarily, but we really needed to start reaching out and facilitating that kind of stuff as well. So really, I feel like my role is like traffic cop, trying to direct traffic, and so that's my role, and I don't know, maybe you can add.
I was, prior to this, the treasurer of the former group, and so I am now the treasurer of this group. But I have to say, without Brian, I'd kind of be lost because I don't have QuickBooks and I don't know how to use it. So I do a lot of the banking, and then I send it to him so he can input it. So we have a whole system going now, which is not the most, best thing, but we're working on it. And then I just kind of fill in where needed, I think. That's my role. When something needs to get done, I step in and get it done. I've put together a couple of performances that we've done. So.
Okay, so I'm the secretary, but my job is sort of more production. So I help sort of facilitate the concert. So I've engaged the conductors and the soloists and dealt with the contracts for them and their travel, things like that. For the actual concerts, I work with somebody to do the physical programs and the digital programs. So for each concert that you go to, it's completely different information. I also had a little bit of training in the Adobe Suite, and I realized very quickly that the learning curve was way too huge. So I asked for help. So I teach at UTSA. I teach violin at UTSA, and we have a music marketing program. And one of my former students graduated and has been doing some work like that, and he was making programs at UTSA. So I said, hey, can you help me? I know you already know how to do this, and you do a great job. So he's been helping us. So we work together to get those programs ready. So one thing is I feel like we know a lot of stuff, but also just to learn how to do it all is too much. So the more we can find people who are already experts and ask for help, and people are willing to help, it's been really good. I knew more people than I realized that I knew before I started this, but I do know people that are good at what they do, and that's kind of, I think, to me, an important thing, so I'm not down in the weeds trying to write the program notes myself. I found somebody who's very good at doing that and is happy to do it at a good price. So that's sort of what I've been doing, the operational stuff.
For me, it's been the website, as earlier mentioned, but also the ticketing platform and kind of overseeing a little bit of the box office activities on the day of the performances. But I think we all, to some degree, are talking to people we know about their interest and how can we reach out to them and bring them into the performances, and also see whether or not they are interested in supporting us in a financial way. We're constantly trying to tap all those resources, all our connections. It's an ongoing effort to build those relationships with people. But I think we all wear so many hats that we can't possibly imagine we can't relay all those roles. I'm sure many of you are in the same boat in the room. You get tongue-tied, as I am right now, and trying to think of all of the things that you do. We shouldn't forget that we actually are the performers in these ensembles too.
And that.
And that's, that has been the primary component of much of our lives before. I also teach at UTSA as well as an adjunct professor. We're all parents, and that never changes, right? Once you're a parent, you're always a parent. So we're trying to juggle so many things, as I'm sure everyone who finds themselves in a startup. You just never know how much you can do until you try, though, because things get layered on and you start to get some efficiency. Some things work well, other things you need to outsource, as Stephanie was mentioning. And we're certainly in that process of discovering which elements we need to hire staff for, and which elements we need to just really outsource to professionals so that we can move up to the next level.
You guys have just dropped so many great startup nuggets about community and outsourcing and, finding your own limits. And I hear prioritization and, what you're describing, balancing, life and family. I know everyone in the startup world can relate to every one of those topics. Additionally, I wanted to talk to you, probably all of the founders out there can relate to either the launch that they had when they ultimately decided to launch their company or their product, or the launch that's imminent. I bet few of them have had a date that's quite as concrete as yours and quite as quick, in the making. But if you could talk just for a minute about some of the challenge related to that launch and the speed with which you had to put all of it together. I know you've addressed some of it, but if there's anything else, just like kind of the biggest hurdles in getting this off the ground, what your biggest challenges were.
I mean, really, we had the interesting thing about figuring out how to produce these concerts and starting to produce these concerts has really been the order that you had to do things in. And really, it should have been apparent to me, but it wasn't. The first thing you needed was a date. You needed a date where the concert was going to happen. I was thinking, we need to talk about repertoire, we need to talk about our vision. No, we actually needed a date in a building to have a concert, to get musicians in there. And it's like, well, of course. And so really that's where a lot of this all started. And for the first several weeks, really the planning was all about where can we fit what concert when on what day, what conflicts, what doesn't conflict. And really there was a good 2 or 3 weeks of scheduling, and I hate scheduling. I hate it. Then after we had those dates, then basically we were off to the races, where Stephanie was basically contacting all the people that were kind of on the list of who we could get to come and conduct. And then you basically let the orchestra know, hey, show up on this day, and believe it or not, they did, and we had some really amazing concerts. The really scary hurdle, I thought, for us was getting the website done and getting the website up in order to be able to let people know that weren't the musicians on the stage to show up to the concert and be a ticket buyer in order to buy those tickets. So like getting that system in place was really, I think, ultimately like the biggest hurdle, trying to get that done and in such a compressed timeline. Because really, normally when symphony seasons are sold, you start in February and you have many, many months of lead time and marketing in order to get this to happen. We were trying to do this in weeks, not months. So that's.
In addition to that, besides us starting to sell tickets in February, normally we a symphony orchestra would be programming its programs a year in advance, sometimes two. And we started in the end of June, beginning of July. So, and Stephanie does get a lot of credit for that. She did a lot of work. And we got a lot of suggestions from our colleagues for soloists and conductors because we've all been in this business for so long. And so many conductors have come through town and soloists too. And we were very fortunate that they have fond memories of us and wanted to come back and help us.
So I want to just pick and ask so many questions at this point about, the startup hurdles and, what's it like running a symphony? What's the HR like? Like, how many people do you have to wrangle to get everybody on stage? Like,
The chief wrangler is not on stage with us right now. It's Peter's wife. Peter, do you want to actually talk about what it's like to live with a live?
Well, I'm used to asking my wife where I need to be, and I'm sure many men can relate to this, or partners can relate to their partners saying that. There are a lot of people to move, and we're talking dozens and dozens and dozens of people who are very independently minded. So she contacts them for our performances, and we've got a lot of email flow between the two, and then there's phone calls and so forth. And then occasionally, of course, people will get sick, or there's some other conflict that we weren't aware of. It is a large endeavor that never ends. HR is something we should all respect and be kind to people who work in HR because it is a difficult job.
excellent. How about financial, creating a budget for a Philharmonic group? And what does the budget for a group like this look like? This will make some of the startups gag, I'm sure.
I don't know in what way, but I mean, really the main cost of orchestras are all people. I mean, it really is. It's just all people. I mean, we got a lot of press a little bit ago because we were very fortunate to buy the assets of the symphony, the music library, and the instruments. But really, those are like one-time purchases. The ongoing expense of running an orchestra is really just paying payroll, making staff. And so like the payroll that we're kind of looking at is way less than the symphony used to be. I mean, just out of necessity, we're starting up, we're having to start small. And really the budgeting is about, oh, well, we have these concerts on these dates, these conductors are coming in, there's this many people, and the hall's gonna cost this much. So there's that kind of budgeting that just goes on, but then there's the unknown things like buying those assets. That was an opportunity that just presented itself that you couldn't pass up. But it also comes with costs that were unexpected as well. And so that not only was took time away from what we were trying to do already, which is probably another startup problem, because all of a sudden there's going to be this thing that happens, and it can be a really good thing, but it still is happening.
And there's loans and insurance and
there's all that too.
valuations and moving and storage and all the things, right?
Yeah. So that's kind of how all that kind of got filtered together.
Yeah. What does it cost to run the group?
So I mean,
for a
our
year?
budget. So our calendar year, our budget year is the calendar year. So I think we're going to probably get to 1.2, 1.3 million dollars this year.
How would you guys like to have to start with a 1.2 or $3 million budget and all that fundraising that's involved? So a combination of selling tickets and donations, corporate funding, grants, all of those fronts, right?
Yeah, and really we're running as fast as we can to try to capture all that, because the other thing that we didn't talk about, like the same as far as programming goes, the fundraising window or horizon is longer than 3 months. I mean, so really fundraising that should have happened, ticket sales that should have happened, we're trying to catch up as fast as we can, and we're just trying to run as fast as we can.
And especially in this economic climate, everybody is aware of what the fundraising situation looks like right now on the for-profit front as well as the nonprofit front. It's challenging out there. So, are there any other major hurdles or challenges or things that you guys have faced that you want to share in terms of just startup formation hurdles you've had to jump through?
What's today?
So-
Friday? No, I don't know. I mean, it's maybe someone else.
Yeah,
can-
so I think we knew how to put on concerts. We've been all doing that for a really long time. And the product is the orchestra, like we said, and it's the same people that we've been with forever. So we know how to do all of that. But becoming our own entity over the summer in a hurry was really challenging. And Peter was amazing at that because he learned how to make a website and how to do ticketing. And we knew we wanted to launch and we needed to come up with a new name. We came up with that fairly quickly. But this was news. Nobody knew, as far as we knew, that we were going to do this. It was kind of a surprise that we were just going to take over this orchestra that just folded. So our timeline was really fast, and we wanted to make sure that we announced it all with a good splash. Like, we are legit. We know what we're doing. Here's who we are. She was super helpful in that. But our timeline was so fast because we wanted to launch the website, have our new logo, say what we're doing, over the span of weeks. And so that was very intense and very stressful, but it was very important to us that we had everything lined up so that when we said who we were, it would look like we really were ready. And I think we did a good job of that, but that was very intense. And now
It's just smooth sailing from that point on. It's just been easy.
No, but I think it was really important to us that we announced who we were in a very professional way.
Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about some goals or milestones. What's coming up? What are your goals for the organization?
I would say the first goal is really to keep the ensemble together and grow and retain talent. And keeping that talent here, keeping the legacy of the symphony going, I think is really part of what we're trying to do. The programs that we're putting out, my goal as far as the programs is to create a memorable, meaningful experience for people. Concerts don't mean anything if you can't remember them. And so I feel like that's what we're trying to do on stage. And then really reaching out into the community in a meaningful way for a lot of the kids that have just, really been left behind in the pandemic. That's my feeling.
Just add to that, so we're doing all these student concerts at high schools, and our plan and the way we've scheduled it is that we're going around to 9 of the high schools around town. So we're trying to hit all basic areas of the town. We are anticipating performing to approximately 30,000 students during the course of this academic year. And we've already had 2 weeks of performances, and I don't know what the numbers are at the tally at this point, but I'm sure it is over 6,000 by a long shot. Today we were at Brennan High School, and earlier in the week we were at Reagan High School. We were in 3 high schools earlier in the month.
Yeah,
And
so I was going to say that's Judson Performing Arts Center, East Central, and what was the Southwest. Southwest.
yeah, so we're it's interesting to go around to the various the various areas of town, but when you get up close and you see the expressions on the faces of the kids, they're just having a blast. Many of them haven't been on a field trip in years, and their teachers are excited. The kids are excited. You should hear the applause. It's just really spectacular to be out there and giving them experiences that I can tell you. I've talked to many adults in San Antonio will just come up to us and say, I remember, when I was a kid, when I was in 4th grade, we went to hear the symphony play at that point, and they said it was a wonderful experience. It really shaped my life. I remember that so vividly. And we're out there, and we just did that for over 2,000 kids today. And so we're out there doing that, and it's a good feeling. Kids need these experiences to experience culture and technology and everything. And every parent wants to give their kids a wide assortment of things to think about and to react to. But our programs, I think, are one of the highlights that we are bringing to the community in San Antonio, and we're happy to do it.
I think another thing that I'd like to point out for the people that are actually starting this, founding these things, there are long days. I mean, there are long days for all of us. We actually get that feedback and we get that positive vibe, and I think that has kept me going and kept me strong, and I think that's probably very important for any founding group, like have something like that they can point to a benchmark or a milestone that really is emotionally meaningful, because that has been meaningful to me.
And you guys could have launched the season and just performed, Friday, Saturday nights and performed for an adult, public audience. You chose to take on all of these school performances. You chose to build those into your budget and to build them into the community. And I think that community outreach is really commendable and something that's really different about what you're doing. And if I remember correctly, this is significantly more than the other symphony, the prior symphony, was even doing in the schools. Is that correct?
Yeah, we kind of doubled what they were doing. I mean, we historically did this amount in the past, like 15, 20 years ago. Even still, it feels like you could play almost all the time and still like be reaching out to kids all the time. The other thing that we're doing is actually inviting people into the main concerts, like students into the main concerts and rehearsals. So that's good too. Older students, high school students. So.
Excellent. Okay, I want to be sensitive to the time. I'm not getting we got about 10 minutes. Okay. Then Q&A. All right. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on, I know that I work with a lot of different businesses, big and small, a lot of different teams, and I just think that you guys have the most incredible spirit of collaboration. You are so highly functional as a team that I don't even know exactly what question to ask to kind of pull the advice out of you, but I think so many founders, so many companies building teams, trying to create an internal culture could learn from it. You may do it so naturally you don't even know how to answer the question, but I want to see, is there any advice that you guys can provide to other founders on working together, on collaboration, on culture?
So we're different because we're musicians. My role in the orchestra is very defined. I'm a second bassoon player. That is not like marquee information. So I know that my role is basically support. And so every once in a while, you have to step out in front. And so as a musician, as a successful musician, our jobs as a musician, not as whatever we're doing on the board these days, is to know when to step forward and when to step back, how to make other people sound good while they're doing their thing. And it's basically just the orchestra in itself is a collaborative effort, except you don't actually talk about it. It's just like, you know what something needs to sound like. You might get some feedback from the conductor, but usually it's like you're on your own trying to make everybody else sound good, and hopefully vice versa. So for us, when we transitioned to like this, basically everyone was trying to make everyone's job easier, and not necessarily for an ego way, in my opinion. We're just trying to get the job done. You know what the goal is, and you find a way to support one another. And that may have been easier for us to do because we're musicians. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that.
I agree with that statement. Also, we've known one another for quite a long time. So we know our personalities and what some of our other interests might be. And which elements of this management and operations that we might excel at. And I think we listen to one another, and we just kind of realized where our strengths might be. And we're constantly listening to one another.
I also agree with all of that. I think also we've been good about delegating the work. Sometimes we would have meetings and there's so many things to talk about that we can't even get through all of the things that we need to talk about. But if we would form committees or break off, or you two talk about this, the more we could like separate the work, we were more productive. So when we kind of took all the work and split it up, and you're in charge of this, but I was in charge of the programs, but I would ask everybody what they thought. I didn't make any decisions on my own, but I was like taking in the lead on dealing with all the emails and the interaction with people, or thinking, brainstorming, but then asking everybody. And I think that when we were doing that, we could achieve a lot more, much more quickly as we were delegating work.
I love the way you describe that, like breakout groups with brainstorming, but then all bringing it back, making decisions collectively.
I don't know if I really have anything to add to that, but it's what Brian said is in our career, we've learned to work together with other people. That's our job. And so it's kind of natural. And we're also all teachers. I think that has something to do with it. We can express ourselves and take the charge when we need to. And so
Natural
Yeah.
communication skills probably don't hurt.
right, and we are friends, and we've known each other, and I've always felt like the symphony has been like an extended family. We all know each other so well because we spend so much time together. So I think that has helped too.
Excellent. Well, it's definitely something that I would encourage any founders that are interested or that are struggling with internal team communications or culture to pick their brains on that subject, because you probably don't even realize how special that is in the way that you guys work together. It's palpable. Okay, so I've been told that it's fine if we give a shameless plug for the next upcoming show. Would you like to tell us about what's next? And when it is?
You want me to do it? Stephanie should.
The date. Yes, the date for sure.
Next weekend, October 28th and 29th, we have concerts at the First Baptist Church of San Antonio, which is very close by, walking distance from here. And we are performing with our former conductor, Sebastian Lang-Lessing, and we're playing some works from Tristan and Isolde by Wagner, which is a big, beautiful romantic opera. And then we're playing Shostakovich Fifth Symphony, which is very fun, very exciting, very energetic, and it's just gonna have you really glad that you went to the concert. They're both beautiful, big, huge pieces and very fun. And we'll be there, so you should come visit us.
That's next weekend.
I suppose the next plug that I should make is also the Master Singers are doing a concert that we're involved with this Sunday at 3 o'clock. At University United Methodist, we're doing a Mozart Vespers.
Excellent. Okay, so lots of opportunities. The website is saphil.org. So if you're interested in more information on upcoming shows, season ticket information, that's the place to go. So I guess at this point, unless you all have anything to add, we'll open the floor for questions. Excellent.
Hi, CPA guy here. Congratulations on all of that, by the way. I know that was a difficult journey. I'm just curious. I think this topic is really interesting here at Startup Week, right? Being in tech and whatnot, and we're musicians, we often think about some separation there. And I guess my thought process is typically with entrepreneurs, we disrupt or we try to reinvent the model. And so I know, Stephanie, you took the lead on sort of scaling this thing up. Do you think that there is a new model in how y'all proceed from like the traditional model where it took you 2 years to plan, but you did this in half the time or record time? Do you think that that's an opportunity for y'all to do things that are different than the old model in terms of being more successful? And the second question for you, Peter, is what technology tools, right, do you or are y'all adopting in terms of being more successful from, you mentioned a lot of emails, right? what kind of technology tools are y'all maybe using now or not using or maybe thinking about using to be more successful?
So I'm not sure that the model is necessarily different in terms of the classical concerts that we're putting on. We do have priorities in what we're doing. So for me and for everybody, it was very important that we had diversity. We have women conductors, women composers, black conductors, black composers, Latino for both. We wanted to make sure we are inclusive to all, and that's an important thing happening worldwide. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't, tone deaf to that, and we like it. So that was important. And also with the community, we were doing some of that previously, but not enough. And we know that we want to do more of that. So I feel like even though maybe it's not necessarily new ideas, we can focus our efforts, maybe rebalance the priorities of what we're doing to be out in the community, do more education, maybe play more Hispanic music to Hispanic communities, which I'm not sure we were doing very effectively before. So I think just being a little bit more conscientious of who our audience is and what they want to hear is important to us.
On the technology front, I'm sure I'll leave many things out, but it's a WordPress website. We're using MailChimp. We use Little Greenlight. We're using the Adobe products, Canva. Oh my gosh, I'm sure there are many other things. Hootsuite, and we're constantly looking at new stuff. There's another management platform for arts organizations that I'm about to take a look at probably in a week or so. So I don't think it ever stops trying to reevaluate what tools are fit the job at hand.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Frank. I write about these guys a lot. I'm actually curious about the logo. Can you talk about the concept for that?
I need Andrew here, our director of branding. So the logo, we went through a process first to review and understand what symphony logos look like really globally. And so it began with a kind of, you don't call them competitors, so a peer, an understanding of what's going on in the world. And through that process, we were able to kind of identify clusters of different types of branding that you see for different orchestras, and we were able to have the team talk through the goals of the organization and what they were hoping to have embodied in this in their vision for the logo. So I hate to use words to describe what I hope you just feel, but we explored a lot of different shapes that pull off of regional heritage from all different cultures, really. We looked at everything from tiles to papel picado to flowers to embroidery to everything from textiles to ceramics. I mean, you name it. We looked at a variety of different traditional motifs, and through exploring that, we found some shapes lend themselves more to expression, to jubilance, to maybe this radial effect of, maybe there's a central conductor there, maybe there's an orchestra, maybe that's the audience. It evokes a lot of things. It's not meant to represent anyone concretely. Hopefully I've done that justice.
Well, usually I hate logo discussions, but this was actually pretty fun. And really, the interesting thing about this is I actually kind of didn't pick this one. And I was absolutely wrong. I slept on it overnight, and it was like, oh, geez, man, I just made a mistake. Because really, this particular one was like close to what was being presented in the field, but then it was like different enough that I was like, oh, wait, that's too jarring, it's too much. is too different. But then I was like, no, this is exactly what we want. So Peter actually, straightened me out a little bit here. And the thing that I actually changed my mind with this was that you could actually hear it. I mean, it had like an oral kind of element to it, and I was like, wow, that is what we need. That works. So I don't know if you want to say.
It was just interesting to work with, again, professionals in other fields that we don't have experience with. So it was just fascinating to watch how their process is and to take part I mean, we just gave them adjectives basically and discussions. We talked a lot, and through those discussions, they went and they did what professionals do. They're absorbing that information from the client and processing it and figuring out what is going to work, and then being inspired by their research. I know they did tons and tons of research, and we're very grateful. And I enjoyed the process too.
I just want to say that I had never thought of it until you just said it, but it does kind of look like an orchestra with the center being the conductor and then us all around. And until you said that just now, I had never seen that. But that's what's so great about it, and it's just fun, and everybody in the orchestra loves it.
Well, to me, that's probably the biggest win, is just to take a room full of creative people and to have them all approve, right? That's, that's the greatest gift. I think worth noting also is that we're using kind of a lowercase approachable font for San Antonio. We wanted to make the Philharmonic very accessible, and we have a short form of the logo and the name, so you'll hear us refer to it as SA Phil as well. We don't expect anybody outside of San Antonio necessarily to understand what that means, but that's okay. This is our community inside scoop, so if you hear us say the San Antonio Philharmonic or SA Phil, you'll know who it is. Any other questions?
This is Miko, the MC. I have a question, if you don't mind. I know a lot of musicians, both artists singing as well as playing instruments, and I'm sure this whole experience going through kind of reinventing the symphony has taught you a lot, as you have expressed on stage. As you travel and do different shows with the high school kids, I want you to think about those in mind as I ask this question. For the individual musicians who get inspired by your music, how should they treat themselves as a musician? Should they almost envision themselves as their own business and startup and brand? Should they associate themselves with a big organization like a symphony or like a group? Just generally speaking, what advice would you have to that high school student you're performing to as they're an up-and-coming musician?
Orchestra musicians, I mean, it's a big group, and so that's always going to be like an institution that's going to be running that. But like, if you're on the classical side, you can really get a good job basically teaching, doing chamber music, doing that kind of freelance work. I mean, really, if you're a freelance musician, especially in a bigger city, you are just an entrepreneur. It's just what you do, and basically, you just make those contacts. It's all networking. It's all really about being professional, but like knowing a lot of different people and making those contacts. Maybe anybody else?
So I work with college students a lot, and I know that I felt this way when I was in college. Whatever your degree is or your focus, all your classes are on that, and then you get into the real world, and you actually need a lot of business sense. You need to know how to manage a checkbook. You need to know how to have a website if you're going to teach lessons. You need to know how to pay taxes. You need to know maybe how to have a resume or a CV. CV is a lot of work, so if you've never done that, you need to get one together. You need to start keeping track of what you've done, so when you're in the little elevator talk, you can, say what you need to say about what it is that you do. And I feel like all adults need those skills, and they're not necessarily taught in school in a very, structured way. And you probably all feel like you've taken on, there's things you have to just figure out or learn or ask people how to do it. So I think it's always good to be able to be independent and be able to be in charge of yourself and self-promote and all of that, and not just kind of be a follower, because there's going to be times in your life where you're going to have to take the initiative and do things yourself, like we're doing right now. And we're capable and we're learning, but I'm not sure we necessarily had these skills before. We're just learning really fast. So that's what I would say. Any opportunity you have to take initiative and be a leader or try things out or be your own, take responsibility for your own actions would be really useful in life.
I think you alluded to it as well. Mentoring, I think, is a good thing for the young people. If they want to pursue any career in any field, I think they should learn or seek out who is in that field, who is around them among their family contacts, and just reach out to people who might be able to mentor them in a lot of these things as they start out in life.
If not, I have one more. So San Antonio Startup Week, it's all about startups and the different challenges we have being a startup as well as the successes. Since you are around music, right? Symphony, orchestra, are there any unique challenges or unique successes, I'll go positive or negative, that you've had as a music startup, as someone in that industry that you'd like to share that may help other startups in other industries, or maybe even that's unique to music? I'll take any of those. But again, just to repeat and summarize the question, any unique experiences as musicians with a startup that you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, I think I don't know how many people have found themselves in this circumstance, but Stephanie had mentioned earlier. I mean, we have conductors like contacting us, and they live all over the world, and they want to come and conduct, and I think that's pretty unique for us right now.
So, like I mentioned, that it was very important to us when we launched that we looked like we had it together. We knew what we were doing. And it was funny because when I was asking conductors over the summer, some of them, had told people we knew, oh, we'll help, just ask us. And I would ask and they wouldn't return my calls. And then, like, the day we launched, I was just getting emails. Oh, can I come? I want to play with you. And I literally daily, I'm getting emails from conductors, soloists, people who are like, how can I be part of this? This is really exciting. I want to be part of this, which is really exciting and also like heartwarming that what we're doing matters and people care. And to me, it gives us the momentum to keep going. Like, this is good. It's hard. It's a lot of work. We need to raise a lot of money, but we should keep going. We should keep growing this because I think it should succeed. Like, everything is so supportive from everybody that's helpful to me. So it's been really great.
Hi, I'm Mary. And I know the history here has been fraught and politically charged and all of those not so fun things you guys have been through. And kudos to you for coming out swimmingly on the other side of it. From a fundraising perspective, are you finding people locally, the traditional funders of the symphony, are they receptive to you now? Have you had to look beyond your early fundraising base? Are you looking beyond the city? I'm curious about the reaction in the funding community.
So really, where we're starting with that is as close to home as we can, and then we're going out. So really, the people that were our initial funders, and maybe that's the initial investors, those are the people that are really close to home. The people that know the artist individually. The people that have been going to concerts for years. They want to, the traditional individual donors, they want to fund us. And obviously people are going to wait and see to write checks with 2 commas in them. It's like, so I think there's a little bit of, we have to prove ourselves. I mean, we proved ourselves in the spring. We're proving ourselves now. That's just going to continue. And we're just, part of this is just having that runway in order to make those asks, reach out to the community and rebuild some relationships that have been fraught over several years, like you mentioned.
All right, well, let's give a round of applause for our panel, the San Antonio Philharmonic. Also, thank you to thank you to Laura August for moderating of Robotic Creative, and thank you all for participating in this session. Our next session will start in